following is intended only for mature audiences.
Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
And I'm number one fan, Tim.
Are you aware of the Free Britney movement and what it means?
No, I thought she was free. She's making music, isn't she?
Okay, so years ago, Britney Spears was forced into a conservatorship.
Oh, what? Huh?
We'll get into that because there's a lot of fucking news about what's going on with this and how she has been jerked around and basically had her life taken from her the last few years.
I thought it was because she made a bunch of really bad mistakes.
Yeah.
Like getting married and then getting divorced the next day, having a kid and gaining a bunch of weight.
What?
And then
I
she
don't
tried
think
to do
they
a
can
comeback
take
tour.
away your legal rights just because you didn't shed all the pregnancy weight.
I don't know. I'm just telling you what I know of her history, I guess.
Okay. You might want to do some brushing up on that. I looked at some stories recently. NPR, Fox, Insider.com, The New Yorker, The New York Post. Like a number of sites contributed to all of my notes for this. I actually did an hour's worth of research on this shit the other day.
On Britney Spears?
On the comings and goings of her case. So she's under a conservatorship in the state of California. Before we get started, I would just like to state that the conservatorship she's under is actually a case of both guardianship and conservatorship by Minnesota standards. I know this because when I was a social worker, I was a guardian and a conservator of vulnerable adults. But in the state of California, conservatorship is used as an interchangeable term for both. Guardianship is legal authority over a person. Conservatorship is legal authority over their assets or their estate. So let's say you've got an 80-year-old woman. She has dementia and no family to care for her. She goes to a hospital. A social worker there goes, she has no one to care for her. She cannot make her own decisions about her own health needs, and she shouldn't be living by herself. So they will say something to the county, perhaps, because they don't have a family member.
Yeah.
That county will seek out someone to be a guardian, whether it's a single person that runs a business and does it, or an organization that does it, like the one I worked for, where, you know, we specialized in guardianship and conservatorship, or both. So, conservatorship itself in California, interchangeable term. Fun fact, up until about, I think it was 1993 or 4, conservatorship was the general catch-all term also used in Minnesota, but they updated the nomenclature so that there was legal designation in language form so that people knew the difference.
Okay.
So that woman that's 80 years old and has dementia, she'd be put under guardianship, probably, and conservatorship, because she would have a house where she had been living and have assets, and somebody needs to do something with that. Sell the house, get rid of the fucking crap in the garage, you know, take that money, plunk it into an account, and pay for like a rest home for them to go, or a memory care facility, which generally runs $8,000 to $12,000 a month. Okay, so legal guardianship is typically enacted for those incapable of making their own decisions, as I've explained. Britney's was approved in Los Angeles Superior Court in 2008 after she had several public mental breakdowns. The arrangement put her estate, financial assets, and some personal assets under the control of her father and a lawyer. Now, the Free Britney movement, as I started off talking about, is a hashtag, Free Britney. It's free her from the conservatorship. Give her control over her life back.
That makes sense.
So during the time that she was having all this tumult in 2008, she was spotted driving her SUV with her son on her lap, not in a car seat. That's a no-no. Well, she famously also shaved her head and was seen hitting a photographer's car with an umbrella around that time.
Photographers are annoying.
Well, and she was like one of the most famous people in the world.
Yeah, she was. She was huge back then.
So look at like Marilyn Monroe, Michael Jackson, Michael J. Fox. These are all people that were very famous at younger ages. And look at the way that the entertainment industry just chews up kids. You know, River Phoenix ended up fucking ODing outside the Viper room. He had
Corey Feldman.
He's
Feldman. Really against Kiss being in
yeah, because of what happened with his best friend of all time, Corey Haim. Yeah, and Corey Feldman talks about how he was molested and the young male actors were passed around like fucking trading cards between producers and shit. It sounds like we're talking Pizzagate, and I hate to use the word cabal, but this like secret open society of pedophilia in the entertainment industry.
Which I don't get why they pick boys. It's sick no matter what. Don't get me wrong.
So we've established that there was reason to believe that Britney was not in her best mental health. Yes? Driving with a kid in her front seat of her car on her lap, shaving her head.
I don't think that shows a problem.
Well, it's going to raise the alarm, and it did. People are like, what the fuck's going on with her? And then beating on a photographer, a.k.a. a paparazzo's car with an umbrella. These seem like I shaved my head and nobody thought anything was wrong with me, right? But I also wasn't one of the most famous pop singers in the world. So you're under a different microscope. So in 2008, when all this was happening, she made several trips to rehab and was committed twice to a psychiatric hospital known as a 5150 hold in the state of California, where she lives. And Laura Newberry of the LA Times spent 3 months examining Spears' conservatorship. This is from the NPR article. Usually it's not an individual who is young, who is working, who is very successful in their field that ends up under conservatorship or guardianship, because that suggests a level of capability that wouldn't meet the standard for legal incapacity. When you are deemed vulnerable or need a guardian, like
The Beast,
you can make an easy case that she's so fucked up she needs a guardian.
Yeah. Okay.
Which would mean she wouldn't be able to live in her own home, most likely. Because they would say, hey, you'd probably function better if you were in a group home, where they dealt specifically with people with your needs, air quoting needs. And that's her level of mental illness and substance abuse needs to be fucking managed, like babysat managed. And I'm not just saying that because she's my ex and I hate her guts, and she spurned our children by being a fucking dumpster fire. My professional opinion to her, when everything started to come unglued last summer, and she dropped the kids off before CPS could put them in my care, I'm like, it is my professional opinion that you need a guardian. She's like, oh, what? So you're going to be my guardian? I'm like, fuck no, I want nothing to do with that. But I think, from what I do for a living, you're a prime candidate. She was like so many of our clients, it's not even funny. Young, stupid, chemically dependent, on all sorts of medications for mental illness. Just a constant fucking thunderstorm of dipshittery. She's a mess.
Put it that way.
Those types of people. But she's got kids, she's got a job, so it seems like, well, she's doing enough. Maybe her life's just edgy because she's a single mom. No, her life is edgy because her brain is broken. And she's now damaging our children's childhood by being a fucking rotting cesspool of failure. Hadouken! But back to Britney. So what they're saying is, it seems unusual that someone like Britney Spears would be in a conservatorship. Because if you look at her, you're like, wasn't she free? Isn't she making music? She's a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, she's like cruising through YouTube videos. Like, it keeps popping up suggestions for her videos. I thought with her making these videos and doing these new songs and all that, that everything was fine. So my question would be, and you're probably going to answer it, is if she's doing all this stuff now, is that all going to her dad and her lawyers to manage for her? Or is she out of it? Or what the fuck's going on there?
Well, you'd see her make Pepsi commercials. She had endorsement deals. She would tour. She'd release an album every 2 to 3 years. She had a 4-year-long Vegas residency that generated tens of millions of dollars.
I remember that, yeah.
Yes. All of her money goes into a general fund that is managed by her father.
The New York Times reports that she has been expressing opposition to this conservatorship in court since as early as 2014, so 7 years ago. According to the New Yorker, on the day before her 2021 testimony in June, she called 911 to report herself as a victim of conservatorship abuse. So she wants to get out of the conservatorship, right? And one thing they're saying is, well, if you get a psych eval, you can get out of it. So a simple psychiatric evaluation would help her possibly end this, but she refuses to get one, stating, I shouldn't need one. Look at all I've been doing. Why should I have to prove myself? I'm more than capable. And she's got many character witnesses that will, in her opinion, attest to the fact that she's well-balanced and should be, here's a legal term, restored to capacity.
Okay.
That's when someone who's on guardianship or conservatorship gets off it. Say they're a young child that was abused. They have emotional problems from all the abuse.
Yeah.
They're emotionally disturbed. And then they get to be an adult, and they prove that they're fine and can function without anybody babysitting them. So if they can prove that they don't need any of that, then they're restored to capacity. It happens. Not a lot, but it happens. Here's some of the things that have happened to Britney while she's been under this conservatorship. Her father fired all of her personal staff and then installed a team of people who reported directly to him and were of his choosing, so that they could report back to him what was actually going on, so that she couldn't, I'm going to paraphrase this in air quotes here, sneak around and do things he didn't know about, violating the terms of her conservatorship. Britney's unable to spend unmonitored time with unapproved people, including old friends. Those are her own words. She's unable to own a smartphone, due to her father's fear that she will, quote, be manipulated by strangers over social media. Her Instagram account is even managed by a corporation. That is per the New Yorker. So he's saying, like, oh, she's going to get duped by people. When you frame it like that, you could say, okay, I get it. She started off as an entertainer young. She had problems. There's always sharks out there that smell blood looking to exploit rich and famous people to get their cut of the pie. That makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Well, she's saying she doesn't need that, though. You would think that somebody as accomplished as she is would be able to go, this person might be trying to fuck me over. But according to her father, she doesn't have the wherewithal to do that and cannot own an iPhone. She has a basic flip phone. She has lack of control over her own money. And she gets a $2,000 a week allowance. She has bills that she wanted to redo the cabinets in her kitchen. Her father would not let that happen. He would not let her have extra money to go directly to a contractor to spruce up her kitchen.
So what's he doing with all this money? Is he using it for himself?
He's paying himself to manage her fucking assets.
What's he paying himself, $1 million a month?
No. I think last year alone, they said he made $128,000 doing this.
Well, yeah, when you're setting the price, you make yourself worth a lot of money.
She has been forced to work as many as 70 hours a week and sometimes under very questionable conditions to fulfill contracts her father negotiated. She has the inability to get married if she so wishes, which she'd like to, because it would complicate the conservatorship with joint ownership of her property. That's her father's wording. He doesn't want her to get married because it would complicate the case. I will say that having one person in a marriage under guardianship or conservatorship, it gets kind of wonky, especially if one of them's on state benefits for like medical.
Mm-hmm.
There is a leg to stand on with that argument, but it still shouldn't be, oh, it's going to complicate matters so you can't get married. He's denying her the ability to make her own life decision there. Imagine if somebody said to you, well, you know, if you have to split up your assets, that would be really difficult. So why don't you and your wife just have like a commitment ceremony and not legally be married? How would you feel if somebody told you to do that?
I wouldn't like it.
Now imagine if somebody forced you to work 70 hours because they negotiated your labor contracts. How would that make you fucking feel? You're basically, I hate to use the term slave, but you're like an indentured servant.
Yeah.
And I get that this is Britney Spears, like, well, she's famous. She's that. Well, this is a real human being here. And I'm not like a huge fan of hers, but I take a very strong personal interest in this story because it hits close to home with my former career. She cannot drink alcohol. She is forced to keep an IUD in place to prevent pregnancy, even though she has children now and has stated she would like to have more. She was forced to accept an appointed attorney versus one of her own choosing, which I find unusually restrictive. The court appointed her an attorney because her father wouldn't let her spend money of her own to get an attorney that would get her out of this conservatorship. So he's basically like tying her arms behind her back and telling her tread water.
He's doing some shady shit and he doesn't want to get caught.
I can't believe he hasn't been fucking smacked with charges of abuse and exploitation for this. You won't give her money for her own attorney?
You make her live on $2,000 a week, but you're yeah, like I said, he's doing some shady shit.
June, there was a hearing, and she gave a very damning, tell-all, open fucking explanation of, you know, her trials and tribulations while under this, and why she feels that she doesn't need to be under it anymore. Immediately after it, her appointed attorney quit. And then a few days after that, the company that manages her conservatorship also said, done.
They're distancing themselves from this conservatorship because
It's
now,
really
was it
fucking-
damning to her or damning to her father?
It's very damning to her father because it looks like he's basically controlling her, and you want to balance liberty with restriction and never make it seem like you're punishing them. You know, so if I had a client that would call me all the fucking time, I couldn't call their group home and be like, take their phone away. I could say, hey, here's the deal. They're blowing my phone up just to shoot the shit. I have a lot of other clients I'm trying to deal with that have actual needs. So for this person to call me and constantly be trying to like ask me to give them extra money for a new phone when they have a functional phone and they can't have a smartphone. This is a real example. I'm keeping it very vague. But I did have one patient who was mentally disabled, fetal alcohol syndrome, had some personal issues, desperately wanted a smartphone, couldn't have a smartphone, had to keep him off the internet. He would buy shit and then it would get sent to him at the group home. So to prevent him from getting himself into a situation where he is indebted to Amazon or whoever, we had to make sure he only had a flip phone. And even then, he had to ask to use it so that it could be semi-monitored. We didn't listen to his conversations. That's not what monitored means. But it's making sure that he didn't call somebody to come pick him up unannounced and take him out in the community when he had limited amounts of alone time. That's another thing I'm just going to briefly explain. Alone time in the community. When you have varying levels of functionality as a vulnerable adult, some of them are okay to go walk the streets, walk to the store, walk to the bank, have their own bank account. They're only a guardianship case inside a conservatorship, right? They can have alone time. They could be alone at their group home for a number of hours because we don't think they're going to try to butcher themselves or start a fire or waggle their dick at the mailman as they drive by. He had very limited at-home alone time. He had no community alone time because he was just always getting himself into shit. I mean, I had a conversation with him once where I'm like, you're sitting here dropping the N-bomb on two of your house workers here who are people of color. And you throw that word around like it's nothing. If you were out in public and there was a group of gentlemen that were of color and you use that word around them, what do you think's going to happen? Well, they'll probably get mad. Yeah, no shit. You're probably going to get your ass kicked. Well, I know martial arts. I'm like, no, you don't. Yeah, I took karate. I have a white belt. I'm like, dude, they give a white belt to everybody the first day they show up. Everybody starts as a white belt. You might remember one or two maneuvers. You don't fucking know martial arts. And in a group of 5 or 6 guys coming at you at once, I don't care how many fucking Jackie Chan movies you've watched that you think that you can do Power Ranger type shit. It's never going to fucking happen. You're going to get rolled, and we're going to find out that you're some John Doe with a brain hemorrhage in a fucking emergency room somewhere.
Do you know what I am saying?
That's the kind of shit that I dealt with. I had another client that was a functioning alcoholic. Throwing back to one of our other episodes. Also a diabetic. Would drink his meals. Constantly almost going into diabetic shock. At one point, he felt so shitty, he didn't want to get out of bed. I had to talk him into getting on the gurney when I called the ambulance. Because this person resided in public housing. They went to the hospital. Their liver enzymes were 15 times what they normally would be. And I forget what the other physiological measurement was that was off the charts. This person was literally on the verge of death.
Wow.
And they're sitting there like, I don't need to be in the hospital. I don't need to go to rehab. I'm like, well, then we need to talk about hospice. What do you mean? I'm telling you, and the doctor's telling you, that you are on the verge of death. And if you do not have this blood transfusion right now, today, you will most likely, inside of 36 hours, be a corpse. Make your decision. Hospice is where we bring in somebody to sit there and give you drugs to keep you mellow and calm and peaceful and pain-free while you slowly go into the light. That's what's going to happen if you leave here today and say no to this procedure. They're like, oh. I'm like, yes, oh. So do you want to have the transfusion, goddammit? Yes. I'm like, all right, doc, sign him up. Save that motherfucker's life. That's the kind of work I did.
Yeah, some of the other episodes we did, it's just like, I don't know how you do that.
To say that I ran hot all the time for most of 2018 and 2019 and 2020 while I was doing that job is not an understatement. It was a fucking stressful job.
Oh, yeah, I imagine.
And we're talking about one of the most famous people in the world that's in the similar situation, and I don't necessarily think she should be. I'm not saying she's 100% perfect, because being under that much public attention will drive people fucking bonkers. Look at Rick Moranis. He quit acting because his wife got cancer and because he couldn't handle the fame and balance his family. He just wanted to be left alone. There's tons of other people that have left being famous. Josh Hartnett, the actor. You might know him from movies such as Lucky Number 11 or Pearl Harbor. He got out of the public eye and disappeared for a number of years, and only in the last 2 years has gotten back into acting. He wanted no part in it. So there have been numerous hearings about this in the past few years, ending her conservatorship, right? Mm-hmm. And they have extended it repeatedly. All this talk of them extending it again from 2019 into 2020 just happens to coincide with the time that Britney Spears posted a video on her Instagram revealing that she accidentally burned down part of her home gym after leaving some candles lit. So are you a little conflicted right now, hearing that? Is she just careless, or is she actually deserving of having somebody monitor her life? Maybe not to the restrictive nature that he's doing it, but is it possible that she might need a little help?
I don't think she purposely set it on fire, but
yeah,
people do that all the time.
Well, let's go back to that hearing on June 23rd. In Spears' 23-minute testimony, I said she talked about a lot of the shit she's experienced. Mm-hmm. One moment of her testimony is exceptionally striking. After observing that the younger generation of pop stars faces much looser expectations than she herself did, noting that Miley Cyrus is allowed to publicly smoke pot without getting stuck in a conservatorship. So she talks about what she's been through. She's like, my own precious body, who has worked for my dad for the past fucking 13 years, trying to be so good and so pretty, so perfect, when he works me so hard. That's like when she made that statement, and I actually went and listened to the testimony. I've heard her say those words. She's really emotional. She's like, holy shit, I have been sitting here just beating myself to death, working as hard as I can to keep up with all this shit that he makes me do. Let me out of this. So when she talks about herself like she understands it in a way like her body doesn't belong to herself, you know? It makes sense because under the terms of her conservatorship, it doesn't. Like that IUD thing. I want you to picture if somebody said, Tim, you need to get a vasectomy. Why? Well, just because, you seem to have a lot of problems right now and you don't need to make your life any worse by having another kid.
Yeah, I don't think I'd like it. I'd like it to be my own choice. Because
that's basically what they're doing to her. It's a form of birth control. This is about power and control.
Yeah.
Now, even if it's not Britney Spears, the same type of level of restriction is put into place. And I'm going to wow you with this. It's not too uncommon. There was a female client where I worked who was on the caseload of one of my coworkers, and this person was in their early 20s, drug addicted, mentally ill, had a boyfriend, would sneak out of their group home all the time to go fuck him, and they wanted her to be on birth control so she wouldn't get pregnant. And every time she would go out and fuck her boyfriend, I'd overhear my coworker asking her, well, do you need to take a pregnancy test? Do you need to go get Plan B? Like, some people are so fucked up that you don't want them to have children. Like
the Beast.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that she's not under guardianship and that she already had her fucking tubes tied. Or whatever they did to her. I think they took out some of the plumbing. She had 3 C-sections. She's not having any more babies. This dad of hers, whose name is Jamie. She also has a sister named Jamie, mind you. He has sat there and continually done whatever he could to keep himself in power in her life. Her mother tried to get involved in this, right? But he wouldn't let her mother get involved. His health took a turn for a while. And during that period, Britney was so upset about it that she checked herself into rehab. And they use rehab as a very loose term. She basically went to like a therapeutic clinic, I'm assuming. She wasn't like there for narcotics abuse.
Yeah.
But she went there because she said she felt her mental health take a hit. Her depression and anxiety were worsening because her father was dying. He bounces back. He's back in charge. They had established an interim caretaker during that time. That person stepped down. So that's just one more person that doesn't want to be involved, but he doesn't want to give up his fucking stranglehold. It's weird. It's just power and control. It's fucking sickening.
Again, I think he's using that money for himself. He's doing some shady shit, and it'll come out eventually.
Well, I think, let me see. Let's just take a quick little something look here at what her actual fucking net worth is. I would not be shocked if it's almost $100 million. You would think it would be more than that, right? $70 million.
She's only 5'4".
I'm odd that that's what you honed in on, but yes, she's only 5'4".
Well, I can't see everything on the screen. Where's it?
$70 million.
Ah, there we go.
So she has $70 million. That's enough money for multiple lifetimes. I don't foresee her as being a person that's going to go out and spend herself broke, but that's how her dad treats her. Now, earlier this month, I think it was even last week, there was another hearing. She was ruled that she can now get her own appointed attorney. So things might turn a corner. But this shit is nonstop on social media. Nonstop.
Any of it, so.
Well, if you don't go on Twitter, or you don't go... I mean, if you just Google hashtag Free Britney. Look at that. I type in F and R, and the first thing that comes up is Free Britney. Now, maybe it's predictive because we just did her net worth, but 9,060,000 results in 0.74 seconds.
Wow.
To say that people are passionate about this is an understatement. And I just thought it was very interesting due to my previous line of work. Just like, oh, here's some fucking overlap with the entertainment industry. I never really took the time to pay it much mind. I mean, I will say that I had loosely heard about it, but I never really delved into it. I had heard kind of bits and pieces and thought, nah, is he really doing that to her? Yeah, they basically took away her freedom.
Her father did.
Well,
the courts had to allow it,
the courts did with her father as the facilitator. So it's sad, and hopefully this gets resolved in the next year here, because things have just really ramped up in terms of both the speed that it's being examined and the ferocity with which all this attention is being paid to her side of the story now. Because even though she's Britney Spears and I don't like her music, you see somebody like that and you think, Jesus Christ, dude. You're treating her like property. And the last thing I will say is, her former husband, the one that she married, the backup dancer, Kevin Federline, who she had 2 kids with, he got a restraining order against Britney Spears' dad after there was an altercation between her oldest son, Sean, I believe, and the dad. So her dad is not this fucking angel.
No.
Aside from all of the other obvious questionable decision-making in her case, he just seems to have a lot of issues and rub people the wrong way. Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It. That is at What Do We Call It. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show for the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
And I'm number 1 fan Tim.
And that's the end.